Hello there, Garrett.
How are you, Stephen?
Oh, good, thanks. Channeling the evil spirits of Nietzsche and various romantic poets.
Cool.
I noticed the rather rationalistic scope.
What's that?
Oh, the 5 points. Very much a rationalist outlook.
So rationalist as opposed to romantic?
Well. Uh, Rationalism is a belief that there are ideas which, let's say, measure out in reality as being true. Like people would say, or used to believe, that mathematics were ideas where we were literally grasping a real truth about the world.
Right.
Of course, there are arguments about that. Now, rationalism is a belief that not only is there mathematical ideas which are universally true or worldly true, but there are other ideas that are true. So rationalists would say there are certain ideas which are rational and other ideas which are irrational.
Did everybody say Happy New Year to each other? Happy New Year,
Not yet.
Garrett.
Happy New Year, Jenny.
Yep.
Thanks for reminding us of our etiquette, our annual cycle around the sun etiquette.
Uh-huh.
There's only
I
going up from here.
what's that?
There's
I
only
haven't,
going up from here. The
I
sky's the
haven't
limit.
seen you. I haven't seen your daughters in months. How are they doing?
They're
Your beautiful
good.
daughters.
They're normally at uh what's it called? Ice skating practice. I'm going to be very slow tonight. I'm very tired. My daughter woke me up at 5, maybe a little earlier, so, um, but their ice skating was canceled tonight, so you might see them do a little cameo at some point. We'll see
Oh, good.
if
Well,
they
I
come
How
hope
in to
you
old
visit
are
me.
they?
They're
How
six,
old are they? Huh?
6-year-old
How old?
twins.
yeah,
Oh, oh.
beautiful.
What
Yeah.
are, can I, if you don't mind, may I ask, what are their names? If you don't
Aaliyah and
mind me,
Alora.
what is
What?
it?
Aaliyah and Alora.
Aaliyah
Aaliyah and
and
Laura?
Elora.
Elora.
Elora. Oh, they're
Yeah.
so
Aaliyah and
pretty.
Elora. So both start with the letter E.
Aaliyah is an A, and then
A.
Elora is an E.
Uh-huh.
Very cute.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're fun.
yeah, so cute. You want more kids, Garrett?
I don't think that's likely to happen, but maybe we'll adopt someday. We'll see. But not right now.
Well,
Too busy.
you haven't seen them running over and giving him a goodnight kiss.
Yeah,
It's
No,
just
I
so
haven't seen
adorable.
them. That's so cute. Girls are so cute,
they are. They're very sweet.
Yeah. But you're the only boy in the household now.
I am. I'm outnumbered for sure.
Yeah, you're outnumbered. Yeah.
Well, let's see how many people show up tonight. 80, 100. I mean, your meeting is so popular, Garrett. It's amazing.
Yeah, free will was a really popular topic. I don't know if we're gonna get that many tonight, but we'll see. I've seen a bunch of RSVPs, but I didn't count how many we had. I just have been too busy. But we'll see. But would love to and Stephen just I usually hear romanticism like counterbalanced with empiricism, but I don't see that. I kind of don't see that as like you have to choose one or the other. I'm kind of in both camps. So I would be curious maybe in the conversation portion, because right now is the social where people just introduce themselves rather than conversation. But when we get to the conversation, I would love to hear why you feel like the five intentions are, rationalist. But but maybe let's not cover that now, but I'll give it to you for bring it back up again in the conversation portion. But for now, I would love to hear, anyone that wants to introduce yourselves, and where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic. And you can either raise your hand or just speak up if there aren't hands up. Oh, and I need to lock down the meeting so that in case we get troll bombers, we can manage that. You can hear the girl screaming in the background potentially.
Well, okay, I'll introduce myself.
Yeah, please do.
Um, I haven't been to your meetings. I've signed up a couple of times and then had to cancel. So today I decided to do it. I see that you have a lot of interesting discussions, and I thought the topic simple rules, that's the key, simple rules to live a better life. I mean, who doesn't want to know that, right? Unfortunately, I did not do the pre-reading, so I'm sorry. I did read the five intentions, and I think I agree with that. So let's, I'm just here to learn more. I'm calling in from the Washington, D.C. area.
Cool. Welcome. We're glad to have you. And glad you were able to make it this time, and welcome, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you'll agree that they are simple, but we'll find out. I mean, as simple as five rules that are all encompassing, and no, I'm just kidding. Like, not totally all encompassing, but if you want to, like, I used to be trying to simplify life down to one simple rule, and that was like just not super feasible. Although I think I came up with a reasonably good rule, but I think the five are, fairly useful and in terms of guidance, and you can tell me if you agree or not at the end. That's what free thinking is all about. We share our open, honest opinions, and so yeah. Welcome, Kamana. Am I saying that right, Kamana?
Actually, it's interesting. It's not pronounced the way it's spelled. It's the middle A is silent, so it's pronounced kamna, two syllables.
Kamana. Okay.
Yeah, that's how it was translated from the Hindi script, where there's a soft ah sound after every consonant. So that's why it was put there, because they also have like two consonants together, in which case it would be kamna instead of kamna. So.
Got it. Well, thank you for correcting me. And anyone else want to introduce themselves, or feel free to raise your hands, or just speak up if there are no hands up.
I'm David, David C. I live about an hour outside of Philly. The topic of the meeting caught my attention, and I may have to exit out early. That's no reflection of anything that is done here, but just the whole thing about what this is about caught my attention and my interest, and that's why I'm here.
Cool. Welcome. Anyone else want to say where you're connecting from and what interests you in tonight's topic?
Yeah, connect.
Brooklyn, did you want to speak, or maybe you just didn't realize you weren't on mute? Anyone else want to share? Yeah, Money.
Yes, this is my first time on, and I live in Collingswood, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia, and looking to engage in a thoughtful way, both within me as introspection, but also connecting with a community of like-minded folks that are interested in this topic and so forth. So I'm really energized to be here and looking to learn and to contribute.
Cool. Well, welcome. We encourage that both, and you'll find I'll post some links about the FTI, including our membership. And if you're looking for a community that is interested in these five intentions, I call them the five simple rules. The FTI members community is a community of people that are trying to, leverage the five intentions to improve our lives and the lives of people we can influence. So you may want to check that out. There's no fee for membership at this point. You do have to apply and get accepted by the existing membership, but as long as you're philosophically aligned with the five intentions, that's usually not a big deal. But I'll share, actually, I'll just share the link now because I mentioned it, and that way I'll probably share it again too. So anyone else want to introduce themselves and welcome, Mani, and anyone else want to introduce themselves and what interests you in tonight's topic, along with if you are willing to share where you're connecting from. I'm also in New Jersey, by the way, Mani, although in the other end, in North Jersey by about 40-minute drive out of New York City.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jess.
Hi. I am joining from Beaufort, Georgia. I actually grew up in New Jersey, so
Cool.
always refreshing to meet other New Jerseyans. So I am always attracted to simplicity. That's actually one of my top 5 values is get everything boiled down as simple as possible. So um, definitely saw this headline and was interested in hearing about the different thoughts here. So nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. You can take the girl out of New Jersey, but you can't take the Jersey out of the girl. So
That's right.
my girls are Jersey girls. So, and my wife married a Jersey girl too that lived not just, grew up not too far from where I live now, actually. So, but anyway, I digress. So anyone else want to introduce themselves and what interests you in tonight's topic?
I'll say something.
Yeah, go ahead,
So,
Victoria.
my name is Victoria. I live in Queens, New York. Um, and I'm always interested in Garrett's topics. They're very philosophical. Um, and there's no boring topic that he has. So that he talks about. And that's about it. I'm a nurse. I work as a healthcare worker in the city. Uh, I have 2 cats, and they like to listen to me. When I'm on, and they like to listen to Garrett too. Yeah, yeah, it's true. When every time that you were talking, they come around. Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. Okay, that's it. Nice meeting you.
So whatever our number of attendees are, just add 2 to that. So we have 2 cats coming too. So, um,
Yes.
Victoria, we are going to be having regular meetings in New York City on the 3rd Saturday of the month. If you ever want to come, there's one on the 20th, and then we'll be meeting hopefully every 3rd Saturday if there are no schedule conflicts for me. So just so you know,
Okay,
for,
thank you.
and for anyone in New York City, we're the New York City commuting area. So. Anyone else want to introduce yourself and what interests you in tonight's topic?
Hello, my name is Robin. I actually spelled my name wrong on here. Um, so I'm joining from Baltimore. I joined one of your sessions for the first time last week, and I was very intrigued by the topic last week and noticed that there was another this week that was even more intriguing to me. So I'm happy to be here, and it's just something that's really caught my attention, and especially from the aspect of living better. I want to learn anything about that topic.
Great. That's exactly what these 5 intentions are all about, is how to live better. I've tried to make them very universally appealing. I'll get into that, but actually I wonder if I think I did include it. But Sean has his hand up, so let me let Sean go while I look this up.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. My name is Sean. I live in Southbury, Maryland. I have been joining this group for a while. I try to join this group, try to find some solace in current political environment. So if you can, okay, that's all.
Great. Good to see you, Sean.
Good to see you.
Sean, I'm going to make you a moderator too, by the way, a co-host, in case we get trolls, so you can help eliminate them if you're able to.
Okay.
And anyone else? We have 3 more minutes until the presentation starts. If people want to introduce themselves. Anyone else want to introduce yourself along with what interests you in tonight's topic?
I'll go. If no one else will, I will begrudgingly speak.
Please do.
So yeah, my name's Will. I'm on the east coast of Australia. God save the King, King Charles III.
3 cheers for King Charles.
My compatriot Stephen, he's just down the road, about 3,000 miles south of me.
We're a couple of loyalists in a nest of people that revolted against the empire.
God save the King. And yes, I'm on the East Coast. I'm about 100 miles north of Brisbane, as Americans call Brisbane, Australia, host of the 2032 Olympic Games. And I've been attending this group for probably a few years now. Very interesting discussion. Garrett's a marvel, as you probably have observed. And I'm interested in this topic. I think number 2 on the list was something I just had glanced at it then. I didn't even know what the topic was today, to be honest, but I just glanced at it then, and it mentioned identity. And I find identity very interesting. That Carl Jung spoke about. Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, contemporary of Sigmund Freud, spoke about the persona, the self that we present to the world. So I'm not sure if you're going to chat about that directly, Garrett, but I do find the concept of identity interesting. And they say, be yourself, like there's self-help books. Self-help books are the most commonly found books in secondhand bookshops because they're pretty well useless, most of them. But a self-help book say, be yourself, just be yourself. Well, you might identify with certain things, but not everybody's going to like you if you just be yourself. I find that interesting as well.
Will, maybe the object is not right for the subject. Maybe you're the problem. It was a self-help.
Yeah, I think I'm beyond the self-help. But yeah, it's interesting. I find the whole thing of identity and interesting, and what that says about what we expect from others, who we identify with and who we present as. What does that reflect about what we expect from other people? So yeah.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the event that we did that talked about be yourself. I think it was the one on self-worth, to be honest. Which if we lost that video, which we might have, we've lost probably 20 or 30 videos in the last year and a half, and we'll redo the ones that we lost. I'm having my team member do a reconciliation of the ones that got lost, and we'll redo them. Yeah, I would say yes, be yourself, but be the best version of yourself, which I'll go into in a little bit because we're about to get started. That's part of the first intention. I do think being yourself is good, but if you're not being the best version of yourself, you're not putting your best foot forward. And so I would argue that it's always good to be the best version of ourselves, not the worst version of ourselves. And that kind of comes to the Sitting Bull commentary, and I'm going to paraphrase it, where he says there's 2 dogs in my mind, basically one good and one evil, and they fight. And then his grandson said, well, which one wins, Grandpa? And he said, the one that you feed the most. And I would argue if we're feeding the better dog in our mind, then we're putting our best self forward. And that's what we should be doing. And then we present ourselves in the best light possible. And less people will dislike us, although still not everybody will like us. And that's okay. Not everybody is made for everybody, and that's okay too. So Tam, you have your hand up. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then what interests you in tonight's topic, and then I'll go ahead and start the presentation.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening. I'm Tam. I'm from New York City. Currently, I live in Jersey City. This topic, I apologize for joining a little bit late. First of all, I actually just finished work. This topic is really interesting to me. It's the beginning of the year, so I always feel very hopeful at this time of the year for new changes and different perspective on my life and something I want to change in my life. So really looking forward to this discussion. And I think the one thing that interested me in this topic and with the five subjects, I think something about sphere of influence, your sphere of influence, how to amplify happiness. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That kind of piqued my interest in joining tonight. So
Cool.
I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. I will keep silent for the most part because I'm young and kind of an idiot. So I always like to join these types of discussions and learn from everyone else who seems so much more wiser than I am.
Tam, every time in my life that I look back 5 years, I was an idiot 5 years ago, and I hope that that will never change for the rest of my life, because if it does, that means I'm not continuing to grow at a fast pace. And so, don't ever feel bad about where you are. And that's part of what we'll talk about in the five intentions, is that as long as, I would argue, as long as we're following these five intentions, we should feel good about where we are and that we're moving in the right direction. That said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk about why, essentially, why I think that. So today, well, first, oh, I forgot. Let me give the introduction to the event. So you guys have all introduced yourselves. So let me introduce myself for people that don't know me. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm a developer turned software inventor turned entrepreneur. And my hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy. And I'm also the executive director of the Freethinker Institute, which is the organization that brings you tonight's event. The five intentions happen to be the common values that hold the community together. So they are our core values of the FTI, is what we call it for short, the Freethinker Institute. And our goal as the FTI is to help people be the best version of themselves, seek truth, and be fair through transformational personal and professional development. And if I stumble a little bit tonight, I'm very tired. So I apologize in advance for that. We have free events like this one every Tuesday, covering a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry. And we also have weekly members only events where we apply practical wisdom into our daily lives. Specifically, we try to apply the five intentions into our daily lives, but we also, give other wisdom and knowledge and do wisdom knowledge sharing. And we also try to, create like a peer mentoring coaching group in groups of 10 or fewer people. So you'll get to know a group of 10 or fewer people really well. So for people who are interested, I just put the links to the FTI in there, including the one about membership and the benefits of membership. There's no fee right now. There probably will be a fee someday, so now's a good time to join. I also want to encourage everyone that we to follow our only one rule, and that is to remain polite. I don't think tonight is going to be very contentious, but you never know. I think we have one person at least that finds it contentious based on the very little I was able to read in the chat so far. I won't be able to follow the chat, so if you need my attention, raise your hand or speak up if there's something like if I go on mute or something like that. Just speak up, and I will try to pay attention. But in general, we try to hold questions until, based on popular opinion from past events, people wanted to hold questions until after the presentation so they can hear the flow of the presentation first, and then jot down notes of all your questions, because I really do want the questions. For me, the most valuable part of this is the questions, the Q&A, and the conversation, because I'm teaching stuff that I already believe in. Like, I learn much more from listening to other people's opinions about it than I do from presenting it all to you. But I hope that I'm going to add value to you guys by presenting it. And I hope that I'll learn from all of you in the conversation portion. I always do at these events, even when I'm presenting, which is most of the time, although we like to have other guest speakers. So if anyone has a topic you want to present on, feel free to bring it up. Sean, did you have something
Yes, I think someone have Louis from Lori H. I think from her. The background Louis. Okay.
I didn't understand that, Sean. Sorry.
Background Louis. Okay, she mute. That's fine.
Okay. Sorry, there was background noise. So yeah, if the other co-hosts, you can just mute people, Sean. In the future, if someone's off mute that should be on mute, you can click them in the group and mute them. And
Okay.
all I would say about being polite is we learn, we have a much better dialogue when everyone is polite, and that's because we keep in the rational part of our brain and thinking, with our critical thinking skills rather than emotionally. I like to say emotional decisions are usually not good decisions. Not saying always, like in a fight or flight situation, it might be good. But in a dialogue like tonight, there should be no fight or flight necessary. And so we want to speak from the cerebrum, the rational part of the brain, the logical thinking part of the brain. So that said, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. And all right. So, agenda, we're going to talk about the 5 intentions, which are kind of summarized in personal development, transparency and open-mindedness, critical thinking, increasing happiness and decreasing harm, and an eagerness to give and receive love. And then I'll talk a little bit at the end about how to make some new friends. Um, so basically, by way of background on the 5 intentions, by the way, I have 3 monitors, so I'll be looking off in different directions. By way of background, I mentioned in the social, but some people have joined since then. So I'll say I used to try to summarize all of life down to one simple rule, and I found that one rule alone is not complex enough to really provide good life guidance in a wide variety of situations without a lot of ambiguity. There's still ambiguity in 5 intentions, but I think there's a lot less than there was when I came up with one rule. And the basically the putting together the 5 intentions has been probably like a 6 or 7 year effort, with hundreds of hours of dialogue between me and philosophical friends. A lot has gone into it. I launched them probably about 2 years ago, and then I proceeded to make tweaks and adjustments based on feedback from people where people found valid criticisms of the 5 intentions or areas where there was either room for ambiguity or something missing. And sometimes it was just through dialogue, I realized that there was a flaw in the 5 intentions proactively, rather than someone pointing it out. And any kind of learning and growth is good to me, like whether it comes from someone else or from within. And so my goal is to turn them into something that is really practical advice for everybody, so that when you're walking through life in any given scenario, you should be able to follow through the 5 intentions and say, let me go to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And if you do that, you'll end up making better decisions than if you didn't do that. And that's what we do as members of the FTI. We want to, adopt the 5 intentions into our daily actions in life. And basically, it's intended to be a pithy guide to being happy and a good person. Um, and as I mentioned in the social, it is really the core values of the Freethinker Institute. So it's our philosophical foundation, if you will, the ground rules of interaction in the Freethinker Institute are really about the 5 intentions. And I think you'll get a lot more out of these events if you follow the 5 intentions, that even if you just come to these Tuesday night events and not the members only events, you'll get a lot more out of them if you follow the 5 intentions. And I think you'll see why when we go through them. So intention number 1 is a devotion to using reason and intuition to be the best version of yourself, to seek truth and to be fair. We had a whole nother event, I think it was earlier last year, on when to use reason versus intuition. So I'm not going to go into that today because we had a whole separate event on that. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the being the best version of yourself, seeking truth and being fair. And so first is, why should we be the best version of ourselves? No one's perfect. And, a lot of people say, well, I'm perfect just the way I am. Well, I think that We had another event where we talked about this in more detail, but I'm going to summarize and just say, we should all be happy with where we are, but we should also recognize we have room for improvement. None of us is truly perfect and makes no mistakes and does everything perfectly optimally and says things in the most polite and impactful way. And like, think about what perfection would look like. None of us is perfection incarnate. And so we all have room for growth and learning. Now, when people say I'm perfect the way I am, the interpretation that makes sense to me is, whatever your core dreams and aspirations are, and I'll talk about one exception to this. In general, most people's normal dreams and aspirations, you should feel like comfortable that no one should change your dreams and aspirations. Those are your dreams and aspirations. And so you can say your dreams and aspirations are perfect for you because you chose them, and that's fine. But to say that a person is perfect, I would say is a self-delusion. None of us is perfect. We all have room for improvement, and that's why we should try to be the best version of ourselves. And only by acknowledging that we're imperfect can we be better, because if we think we're perfect now, then we don't feel the need to improve or the opportunity to improve. And so we're not even going to try because we think we're already perfect. Why would we try to improve? And I like to joke that the only people who think they're perfect are actually the least perfect people around, because they stopped improving the day they started thinking they were perfect. And so they're usually the most flawed people around, is the ones that think they're perfect. So being the best version of ourselves helps us have better relationships, be happier, help the people we can influence more, and so many other things. If you keep focusing on continuous improvement as a human being, you'll find that you can radically improve the type of person you are. And only if you're surrounding yourself with other people who are doing the same thing will you have a peer group, which is what the FTI membership is intended to be. Will you have a peer group that is keeping pace with your pace of self-improvement? So I already kind of covered this. And so why is politeness at the core of self-improvement? So we all want to be treated politely. So why shouldn't we treat other people politely too? And this is where I'll talk about the three parts of the brain. There's the reptilian, or the fight and flight part I alluded to a little bit earlier, sort of semi-jokingly, but there's also the mammalian or emotional part of the brain, and then there's the logical part. When we're polite, we stay in that logical part of the brain, and that's a good thing for most non-urgent decisions. And even some urgent decisions, it's better. And I've given examples about where emotional decisions can get us into a lot of trouble, because emotional decisions make a lot of assumptions. And if you haven't heard the saying, to make an assumption is to make an ass out of you and me. And so, I don't recommend assumptions. It's always better to ask for clarification and make sure you're on stable ground. And so there is a polite way to say just about anything. Anyone who wants to try to challenge me on that, do it in the Q&A portion, and try to say a thought that can't be said in any way in any polite way. Some things are really hard to say politely, and they're never completely polite. But I would encourage you to try to say it as politely as possible. And we actually we have in the FTI members curriculum a session, like a lecture on giving and receiving feedback, and it explains how to give feedback in a way that's, I think, very polite, and will make your feedback much more likely to be well received. And I've taken classes on how to give feedback in corporate America from Fortune 50 company. And I will tell you that I think that the FTI feedback mechanisms are much better than what I was taught in corporate America. And oh wait, yeah. So what if someone is disrespectful? I would argue that 90% of conflict comes from miscommunication, which means that if you think someone's being disrespectful, I recommend reiterating back to them what you think you heard them say, and ask them if that's what they think. And I think you'll find that almost all the time when you do that, what you think they thought was not what they actually thought. You had a misunderstanding about what they actually thought. And so miscommunications are super common. I also recommend using I feel statements like, I feel sad when you tell me you think I'm a jerk. I wish you could provide more specific, actionable feedback about what makes you feel that way so I can improve my behavior in the hopes that I can present myself in the best way possible. Right? That's a way that, you know, like another way to do that would be to say, you're a jerk for thinking I'm a jerk, right? And that's not very productive, right? Now you're just escalating the conversation and you don't even know why they feel that way. And so better to, you know, adopt a perspective of humility and learning and try to understand where someone is coming from, but also let them know that they're making you feel bad. And usually people, when you use I feel statements, they'll soften up and be a little more sensitive. Most people will, not all. Whereas if you punch them back harder, then they punch you back even harder in return. And it becomes what I call a verbal boxing match, where eventually someone gets knocked out and nobody ends up happy. So giving and receiving feedback is an art. And that's where I mentioned that in the FTI, we have a session on that. So one of the things that we try to do is be both polite and honest. You know, I'm not a big fan of being dishonest, and that includes even false humility, which I've gotten into disagreements with colleagues about. You know, I think false humility is a little disingenuous because it's okay to say what you're good at. If you say it in a polite way and not a way that's putting down other people, it's okay to be self-confident. And we had another event on the difference between self-confidence and egotism. And I think we shouldn't fear being self-confident, but we should also, when we're honest, be polite in the way that we're communicating something honestly. And, you know, that is a way to make your honest feedback more well received. And basically practicing the five intentions, you know, will help include improve a bunch of life skills, including openness, you know, emotional skills, like EQ, social skills, collaborative skills, you know, all the things you see here. The five intentions can help you improve at all of these things. And in fact, when you become a member of the FTI, we have a big sort of life skills list that you will eventually get to if you you know, continue to be a member and get to know the other people in your pod. We separate into what we call pods of 10 or fewer people that are active, and you'll learn about all the different types of life skills that we've categorized. It's a much more I call them life skills, but I started with the concept of intelligences. But I don't like the word intelligences because it sort of sounds innate. I think life skills are something that you can like level up and skill up, and that's more what I think about just about everything. And you know, EQ can be improved. IQ, some say that it can't be improved, but you know, most life skills can be improved. So um, the other thing is self-improvement helps you be a better person. It helps you be a good person. And then intention number 2 is transparency and open-mindedness. And the summary of this is to be transparent about who you are and what you believe. To the extent that you trust someone, you're going to be transparent with them. And then you also want to have an open mind towards new ideas that will help you achieve the first intention or understand where something that you shared transparently may be a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding is also helping you achieve the first intention, which is seeking truth, because misunderstandings are the enemy of truth, right? It is a misinterpretation of truth. And so what you want to do is have an open mind and remember that we all have confirmation bias. Every human being does. And those of us that are intentionally, constantly combating our confirmation bias, which we had another event solely focused on combating confirmation bias, why it's important and how to do it. But, you know, confirmation bias, by the way, is when you only gather information that supports your current beliefs and you ignore all of the information to the contrary that will help you learn new truths. And unfortunately, many, many people have very strong confirmation bias and they can't get unstuck from bad ideas because they're so set on proving themselves right even when it's clear that they're wrong, that they don't see that they're wrong. And so I really want to encourage everyone to have an open mind that we might be wrong. And I'm going to go into a saying that I have about why that is a good thing to do. Transparency is one of the parts to a secret to self-worth. And so for people that have struggled with self-worth, this is most of us at some point in our lives, if not now, have struggled with self-worth. And if you're basically acting like someone other than who your authentic self is, and we talk and we've talked in other events about what it means for something to be a part of your core self. And in the FTI membership, we have what's called the personal profile, which I call informally, that's the technical name for it. The informal name for it is the painting of the spirit. And basically that personal profile lays out all the things that I think make the core of who a human being is. And if you join and you can think of something that is core to who you are that I haven't covered there, I would love to hear it, and then I'll add it. By sharing who you are at your core transparently, if you're not sharing who you are at your core transparently, sorry, then it's hard to be proud of yourself because people don't actually recognize who you are at your core. And so you're constantly presenting to people a version of yourself that isn't who you really are. And so how do you feel self-confidence in who you really are when no one even knows who you are and they can't recognize it or appreciate you for your core self? And so I would argue that very few people really know the right way to measure self-worth. And so I'm going to go through a number of the wrong ways to measure self-worth. One is, how much money do I make? If I make a lot of money, I'm worth a lot. If I don't make a lot of money, I'm not worth anything. And what job do you have? If I'm a doctor or a lawyer, I can have self-worth. Some cultures, say that that's what is true about their offspring, and I don't think that's the right answer. How many material possessions do you have, and how valuable are they? What's your net worth? Is that how much you're worth? No, I think that's wrong. How much power do you have over other people? If you're a high-level politician, just gonna mute Sarge. So if you're a high-level, politician or a Supreme Court judge, well, I must be worth a lot, right? But actually, no, that's not a good measure of self-worth. And then, what I would argue is a little more controversial is whether or not, what other people think of you is the reason, the way you should derive your self-worth. And I would argue that if someone who you don't respect deeply dislikes you, and Will said, well, I forget I think the comment, and I am tired, so I'm like not as on it in my memory, although it's never one of my strengths. But basically, if people if you respect someone, then if you don't respect someone and you're not for them, and they say, well, you're not a good person, but you don't actually respect the person in the first place, even when you're being open and honest about, like, is this a good person, right? Like I was joking earlier about the most flawed people are the ones that think they're perfect. If one of those people who thinks they're perfect goes, hey, Garrett, you're a total jerk, and I don't really value their opinion anyway, because all the things that they're a flat earther, and not to get into I mean, that I think hope is not a controversial subject. I try to steer away from too much political stuff, but I don't think that one's political. But like, I'm not going to value the judgment of a flat earther very well, because I think it's very hard to defend a flat earth hypothesis, I'm going to call it. And so if someone has some very hard to understand beliefs, then my level of faith in that person's opinion is lower. And so just because someone thinks badly of you doesn't mean you're a bad person, is what I'm trying to get at in a long-winded way. So I'm sorry I'm not very pithy today. So the right way to measure self-worth is about being transparent about who you are, first with yourself and then slowly with others. As you get to know them better, you trust more with the people as they show themselves worthy of their trust. You want to be really honest with yourself, and you want to try hard at seeking truth, which is part of the first intention. Seeking truth, not being right about your current belief in the truth. And you ultimately want to trust your own judgment, which is critical thinking, which we'll go into as the third intention. And then you want to try your hardest to do what you have to come to an objectively correct conclusion. And you should try to find positive feedback around you about whether or not you're doing these things effectively. And that's where you have to be really honest with yourself and be sure not to surround yourself with yes men or yes women. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking loyalty is when your friends support you no matter what. And that's not what I consider loyalty. I want my friends to be loyal first to the truth, and for me, friends who are loyal first to the truth, and that's what they mean by being loyal to me, that's the kind of friend that I can get behind and that I want to surround myself with, because they'll tell me if I'm an emperor wearing no clothes, and they'll say, "Hey, Garrett, like you were wrong here." Like they'll give me the honest feedback about when I'm wrong. I don't want someone to tell me I'm right when actually I made a huge mistake and I shouldn't have done that. I want people who are going to help me be the best version of myself, seek truth, and be fair. And so that's where surrounding yourself with a community of people who follow the five intentions can rapidly improve your ability to grow and learn, each other's ability to grow and learn. And we should really feel comfortable being ourselves. To Will's point, like being authentic is important. And I think a huge number of people, and I haven't seen studies on this, but I would be interested to look some up. A huge number of people, especially working in corporate America, feel like they can't be their authentic selves. And I think that's really sad. I think we should all be comfortable being our authentic selves, but we should also be the best version of ourselves, seek truth, and be fair. And if you're doing those three things, you should feel comfortable being your authentic self. The personal profile that I was mentioning is here in full detail. It's a lot more than people fill out. We do it in 3 stages and FTI membership. But all of these are things that you don't really find out about. You probably don't know about some friends that you've had your whole life. Let's put it that way. But they are probably things that are core to who you are, even though you don't know them about some people, or who your friends are, even though you don't know about some of these things about people you've known your whole life. And I do think it's important not to feel like you need to hide your core self with people you can truly trust. Because if there's something about your core self that isn't good or isn't healthy, then your friends hopefully will be the type of friends that will point those things out. And then you can, listen to them with an open mind so that you can be a better version of yourself, seek truth, and be fair. And you can improve yourself. And then doing that will help you move forward and progress as a human being. And we had another meeting on the purpose of life, and I tried to make a good argument that one of our purposes on this earth is personal development and spiritual growth. And if you don't like the word spiritual growth, just use the words personal development. That's fine. For me, they're interchangeable. We had another event on reincarnation where I think someone actually pointed out to me in the event that I made an a priori argument that human beings are reincarnated, but they actually pointed out that science has studied this, and scientists in peer-reviewed research have come to the conclusion that human beings are indeed reincarnated. And so if that's true, then spiritual growth and learning, there's some level of that in momentum that's passed on from one life to the next. And that's really our purpose, is to evolve spiritually. But that aside, even if you don't believe that, hopefully the five intentions will make sense. And I don't think it matters whether or not people believe in reincarnation, as long as we're trying to follow the five intentions, we'll live a much happier life in this life. And if it's true that reincarnation exists, we'll be better positioned after this life as well. And even if you believe in another afterlife position, I think the five intentions would be helpful. So so transparency is important because you want people to know you for your authentic self, and you can form much more deep and meaningful bonds with people when you can be authentic about what your core values are. Another thing that I was recently, I don't see him here, but another thing that I think is really a sign of a resilient friendship is when you can agree to disagree with someone and you can say, look, this is what's right for me, and you say that's what right for, something else is right for you, and we can have different opinions, but not feel like we have to be on the same page. And you do want common values, but the five intentions are intended to be common values. But it's also good to be able to say, look, we're different people, and it's okay to have different opinions about stuff, and we can still be friends even if we have different opinions about stuff. And I was commenting to Remco about who's a regular about how I appreciate about him and I that we can have very different opinions about things, but that we still get along, and I consider him a friend. And then we proceeded to say, but I still disagree with you about this. So it was a funny email series. So and then I would argue that you can be more proud of yourself by sharing who you really are. So open-mindedness, I should go through this faster because I'm going really slow. So open-mindedness is the second half of the second intention. Don't believe anything with 100% certainty because there's always a chance that you might be wrong. And I like to joke like everything is up for grabs. And we shouldn't close ourselves off to new potential truths. Although we do have to pick and choose what we're going to spend our time pursuing. And that's where I debated 40 minutes with a flat earther, and then I decided I'm not going to debate the flat earth with anyone that's a flat earther again, because that's just not worth the time to expend. There's a lot of other more interesting things. And then you want to keep an open mind to those things that will help you be the best version of yourself, seek truth, and be fair. I talked about confirmation bias. So there's two types of truth I would posit, and one is objective truths, which are statements about the world, the objective reality that are provable or disprovable through the scientific method. When there's a difference opinion about those things, I recommend, fact checking, looking for objective sources, and trying to learn about it together if there's a disagreement. Subjective truths are things that we define for ourselves. As a sentient being, we talked last week about free will. I think I made a pretty good argument that human beings have free will. And if we do have free will, we get to decide what are those core elements of ourselves. What are my life goals? And I will say, I think there are some life goals that should be off the table. This is where I disagree with the existentialists who say you can choose anything you want for the meaning of your life. I'll go into the limitations in the next intention, actually in two intentions. But I do think that we all get to decide, do I like Cheerios or Corn Flakes more? That's a subjective truth for me, and I get to decide which one I like more. That's up to me. And there are a lot of things that we get to choose for ourselves that define us as human beings. And so first is you have to say which type of truth it is. When you find someone with another opinion, I recommend first trying to understand why they believe what they believe. And we call that listening to understand in the FTI, where you set aside your current beliefs and you empathize with the person you're talking with. You try to understand where they're coming from. And this was my big takeaway when Remco talked about postmodernism. I've generally been fairly anti-postmodernism, but he talked about it as having empathy for people who have different beliefs. And there I can side with the postmodernist idea that we should have empathy with people who are coming at things from a different direction, because who knows, they may turn out to be more right than we are. And only by listening to them with an open mind can we understand why they came to their beliefs. And we learn a lot more by listening to them than we do by telling them they're wrong. So if we find that they have incorrect reasoning, we can politely point it out. But I generally recommend not forcing the issue unless there's some need for a consensus in that area. If the question is whether or not it's kind of a black, let me give a, whether or not the boat can, stay above water, and you're both going to go on that boat, well, then you probably should come to an agreement because you don't want to drown at sea, right? So there are certain things where you should come to an agreement. Rose, it will be before 8, I think, for the discussion starting. Sorry, I'm going slower than I would like, so I'm going to try to speed up. So seek to learn and admit when you're wrong. You want to focus your effort on learning truths about the world or objective truths and truths about yourself, subjective truths. And and I like to say it's okay to admit you're wrong. By admitting you're wrong with good judgment, you're immediately right again. And you're just more right than you were before. And it's only when we try to claim we're right, when it's clear we're wrong, that we're ever truly wrong. So intention number 3 is critical thinking. We want to hone one's ability to distinguish between fact and fiction, fact versus fiction, and wisdom from folly. Studies show fake news travels faster than real news. That's a bad place to be as society because we're spreading misinformation faster than we're spreading the truth. And so we really need to help people improve their critical thinking skills. We want to help gather evidence from biased and unbiased sources. We did a 2-month series on critical thinking last year, and those will go up on YouTube before too long. And we want to evaluate evidence using logic and reason to come to well-grounded conclusions. And always good to question our own beliefs as well as other people's to learn knowledge and wisdom. So I'm not going to go into critical thinking in a lot of detail because we did do a 2-month series on it. So I'm going to skip past that. Although I will say, why do people not think for themselves? A lot of times we're taught to follow blindly. At home, a lot of families try to tell their kids that they should believe the same thing as them, whether it's religious or philosophical beliefs. And at school, people often try to discourage religious beliefs. So you have at home, people often pushing religious beliefs on kids. At school, them often pushing not to believe religious beliefs. And I don't think that either, like, I think using your critical thinking skills is like improving your critical thinking skills so you can make up your own mind about which beliefs to follow in terms of which are the most conducive to you and helping you and the people around you live a better life is important. Lots of people claim they know the only one right truth, and everyone who disagrees with me is wrong. Stay away from those people. I recommend trusting the people who say you should trust yourself. I learned that from the Buddha, and I have followed him ever since in that philosophy. I want you to all trust yourselves. If you don't agree with the 5 intentions, just let me know why not, and I'll learn from that. But hopefully you'll find value in them. So I'm not going to go into the who we should trust. We had another event on trust, and you want to next is intention number 4. I'm going to go into this one in a little more detail. We covered it a little bit in on wisdom in the we covered it in a fair amount of detail in on wisdom in the critical thinking series. I would argue that for increasing happiness and decreasing harm, there are 2 priority levels. Priority number 1 is the first priority that we should always do first, and that is to prevent significant unnecessary harm for all human beings wherever we can. And I will define what these things mean in a little bit. Priority number 2 is to maximize happiness while minimizing harm and empower others who do the same. And this is where I would say the existentialists are wrong. If someone says, the meaning of my life is to be a serial murderer. No, that's not the meaning of your life, and that's not okay. You can't just decide to be a serial murderer, and that's okay. Sorry, that's not okay. We don't allow that in society. It's causing significant unnecessary harm. And so let's define what I mean by significant unnecessary harm and also what I mean by happiness, because I use an unconventional definition of happiness, although there is no conventional definition of happiness. So I probably shouldn't say that. I should just say I use a specific definition of happiness that is much more aligned with Epicurus rather than like fleeting happiness, which is the way that a lot of people interpret it. So first of all, significant harm. Harm is defined by the person being harmed. Whether it's significant or not is when someone says that they're being harmed. If you put that person in front of a jury of peers, and that jury of peers in a court of law would deem it significant enough that there should be penalties to the person who caused the harm, then it's significant harm. What is unnecessary harm? It's a harm that doesn't reduce overall harm. So for example, if I have a gun and I see someone shooting school children and I shoot him, that's a-okay because I'm preventing the killing of innocent school children. That's necessary harm because it reduces the overall amount of harm. And this is where I take a little bit of issue with, some people say, Buddhists say you should cause no harm. The Stoics are quoted as saying, first cause no harm. But when I get into these discussions with, at least with the Buddhists, I haven't done it with the Stoics, but I would be curious in the discussion portion if Joe agrees with this. I think the Stoics would probably agree minimizing harm is the right thing to do, but I could be wrong. The Buddhists definitely agree with that because I've talked to Buddhist monks about it, and they did agree with it when I talked to them. Like, this is more of an advanced concept. We just want to stop people from harming unnecessarily. So, clarification, I like to say I define a couple of terms. TPP is the number of happinesses one experiences in life or would experience in life based on decisions, and then some translation factor between happiness and harm, and then the amount of harm that one experiences in life for an individual person is total present positivity, total net present positivity, or net present positivity. Sorry, I have the acronym wrong. It should be net present positivity, not TPP, NPP. And so net present positivity is the happiness and harm that a single person experiences in life. And basically, you want to increase that. But you don't want to just increase that for yourself. You want to take all the people you can influence and increase it for everybody you can influence, including yourself, with a discounting rate, meaning the less you can influence someone, the less important their happiness and harm matter. And obviously you can influence yourself the most, so yours matters the most, but then the people close to you, theirs matters more, more than someone in a distant corner of the world that you can't really influence in any meaningful way. So those definitions deal with some of the things like Peter Singer's famous essay on famine, that someone might remember the full name of and be able to post a link to. That's really good and worth reading. But I think if you read what I just went through carefully, and I'll share the presentation afterwards, you'll realize that he has a little bit of a he like I kind of clarify why his argument is not totally solid in some of the things that the argument that he makes that doesn't feel very intuitive to us. There's a reason it doesn't feel intuitive, and it's okay. But it's still, he makes a lot of good points. So why is increasing happiness and decreasing harm the fourth intention? I would argue we all want to be happier and we all want to be harmed less. So why not make an effort to increase happiness and decrease harm for the people we can influence? I would also say, why is this the fourth intention and not the first? Well, if you don't see the truth clearly enough, which the first three intentions are all aimed at helping you see the truth. Thank you, Joe. Famine, affluence, and morality. That was the one. And I don't normally see the chat, but I just happened to see it there. So the first three intentions are really aimed at helping you see the truth more clearly, because most of the people causing harm in the world actually think that they're doing good. I would posit that very few, if any, people are really going out there just to screw people over and cause all kinds of harm just for fun, right? Most people think either what matters to them is more important than what matters to anyone else, and so they don't mind harming other people because they think the only one that matters is themselves, in which case they're not improving TNPP, or they have a misunderstanding, where, maybe like in the Inquisition, the Christians said, well, we're going to torture these people until they say that they're Christian because we're going to save their eternal souls. And they may well have been very well-intended people. They just had a big misunderstanding that, a benevolent God would want them to torture people to get them to become Christian. And so I would argue, the Inquisition was caused probably by people that were not just evil sadists. Most likely it was people with a very big misunderstanding that were willing to go against their own intuitive sense of right and wrong to do what they thought was right, based on their misunderstanding. So support those that you see increasing happiness and decreasing harm, and when you do, that will help you influence their sphere of influence. And then if they do the same back to you, you can have this symbiotic effect where you help each other increase both of your sphere of influence. And then as your spheres of influence grow, you can increase the happiness and decrease the harm for a larger group of people because your spheres of influence grow. And so that's someone mentioned the sphere of influence in the social. Next is a couple of secrets to happiness. First, I'm going to talk about the Stoic path to happiness and then the Buddhist path to happiness. My path to happiness is the 5 intentions, but it's not quite as like path to happiness exactly as direct of a path to happiness as the Stoic and Buddhist one. So first, the Stoic one, separate what you can control from what you can't control and focus your happiness only on the things you can control. It was later repackaged as the Serenity Prayer in Christianity, which is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot control, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, which you can see the parallels there. I used to get a lot of frustration when I would drive in New York City traffic and I would be stuck behind a bunch of stopped cars. Once I started practicing Stoicism and just adopting it into my life and saying, you know what, I can't do anything about these cars that are stuck in front of me. I'm just going to call a friend and chat with them on the phone and have a good time. And I completely, almost completely, sometimes I still get frustrated in the car. I'm not perfect, but I have almost completely eliminated being frustrated in the car from my life. And a little saying that's pithy to remember this is don't stress, just do your best and accept the rest. And that's basically do your best at what you can control and accept whatever comes beyond that. Next is the Buddhist path to happiness, which is from non-attachment, which there's a lot of misunderstanding about. I talked at length with a Buddhist monk about non-attachment. And basically what I learned from him is the way that I translate non-attachment is simply don't be disappointed by anything. A lot of people think non-attachment means don't be attached to happiness and therefore don't even try to achieve happiness and therefore don't have any desires. That's a complete misunderstanding of Buddhism. That's not an accurate read. There are a lot of people who try to teach Buddhism to Western audiences that say things like that, but that's, I don't think, accurate according to my conversations with monks, and it never made intuitive sense to me, but it did steer me away from Buddhism for over a decade and a half. But basically, if you simply avoid being disappointed by anything, you'll never have like strong negative emotions, because you just go, you know what, it is what it is. I'm going to accept it for what it is. And what I like to say here is keep your hopes high. And that's the part that I added. And your disappointment low. It's the only way to go. So those are 2 little pithy sayings that can kind of remind you to stay on the path to happiness. Next is your reward for all of this happiness is a long life. There's a link here that will tell you why happy people live longer. Next is an eagerness to give and receive love. Dr. Krishnesh presented, I think it was actually not last year, but the year before, about the 8 different types of Greek love. And, when I say we all want to be loved, I don't just mean romantically, I mean platonically as well, meaning loving our friends and family. Although familial love is called, I'm probably going to butcher the Greek, storage. And so basically, we all want to be loved, so why not give more love to other people, whether it's platonic or romantic? And so I would argue that if you practice doing this and kind of giving love and kindness to other people, love and compassion, you'll find that it'll come back to you, and people will appreciate the fact that you gave them good vibes, if you will, to say it informally. And I think that if you try that and you don't find that's happening, talk to me about it. I would love to hear why not, and maybe we can talk about how to get things steered in the right direction. So the argument for same life karma, which is what I just described, is pretty strong. We talked about karma last year, and I also gave a pretty good argument, I think, for metaphysical karma. Next is making friends. If you want a new friend group that you can be a part of, join the FTI, and I'll put the links to the FTI in the chat, so you can look up membership and see if it might be interesting to you. And if you like these 5 intentions and you want to have new friends that also like the 5 intentions, which are our common values, the pods are groups of 3 to 10 people that are active. and you'll get to know that group of people that have those common values from all different walks of life. We want diverse political, spiritual, religious, all backgrounds are welcome. The only commonality that needs to be there is a common belief in the five intentions, but we want a very diverse group of people otherwise. So that said, I would love to know whether or not you learned anything today, and if people want to add in the chat whether or not you learned anything today. And then the next thing I'm going to say, we're going to go into the Q&A now. And I would like people to limit comments or questions to one comment or question at a time per time you raise your hand, and limit the length of questions and comments to less than 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to respond to what someone just said by asking a clarifying question or commenting quickly on it, feel free to do so, but keep it to less than 20 seconds. You can just speak out after that person finishes talking. I hope that this was useful for people. And if not, tell me why not. And if so, tell me why. But any questions or comments, if there were any ambiguities, I would love to hear them. And if people can poke holes in the five intentions, I would love to hear those too. They are still in a state of evolution. They always will be. And yeah, so thanks everybody. Feel free to raise hands if anyone has questions, comments, or things they want to say. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
No, I mean, I very much appreciate the presentation. And yeah, I did learn something with the idea of self-worth. I really like the point about false humility in particular, because I think that that's often an issue where people try and turn the attention back in on themselves. And that's kind of manipulative. And I think it also undermines trust to one of the other points. And I think that that's not overlooked. As far as really quickly, just to briefly comment on as far as Stoicism is concerned, it's both, living in harmony with nature. So it's part of wisdom to prevent harm. So the harm and minimize conflict, so to speak. But it's not only harm externally, but this is also harm internally, where you're kind of living in conflict with your values. And that comes back to a lot of what you were talking about as being your authentic self. So there's Stoicism is, looking at it from a couple different perspectives, but that is acting wisely. It's about how you relate to others, which gets to a very important point, which I think you covered nicely, was authenticity. Because the authenticity allows you to connect with people on a different level. And that authenticity is, it's often sensed. And then also people are comfortable with themselves, and if they can accept themselves, they can also accept other individuals for who they are. That's a really important point, because you've probably done the hard work to actually look at yourself and seen your own shortcomings as well as your positives. And therefore you can actually accept people for who they are and their shortcomings. And so you kind of see how your relationships with other people are mutually beneficial. So I think from that perspective, there's a lot of connection between the idea of wisdom, harm, both externally and internally, and coming back to the idea of false humility, too, because I think false humility is a lack of authenticity. So
yeah, I was going to draw that parallel, but you just did it for me. So you that was what I was going to comment on. But I really appreciate what you said about the false humility, because that like it passes for polite so often to be, to practice false humility is what people think is actually being humble. Whereas to me, that's not being humble, it's being disingenuous. Being humble is when, you assert something and someone explains why you're wrong and saying, yeah, I was wrong there. You're actually more right than I was. I'm going to go with your answer, even though you're paid 1/10 what I am, but I'm going to listen to you because you actually had a more right statement than I did as the boss, right? When the boss can do that, that's actual humility. But, false humility isn't real humility because, even the boss doesn't think that about themselves, that, the false humility is very clear. It's very transparent. So I'm glad that you agree with me on that, Joe. And
And it is pride, just by the way. I think you expressed that well. I mean, and Aristotle has the idea of the golden mean, which I don't necessarily think is all that useful, but the idea that pride is one end and humility is the other. And so this idea that you're overly humble,
right,
that it's not necessarily an accurate depiction of reality, and therefore you're not being authentic, and therefore your relationship with other people is impeded by that. So
right,
the boss would never admit that he was wrong because he's not really truly humble. And that's where the
right,
authentic. So yeah.
totally. Kamina. Sorry if I said that wrong. I tried to remember, but
No, no, you said it perfectly.
great.
Yeah, I found very interesting what you said about the secret to happiness is avoiding disappointment. And I have long, I mean, we all experience disappointment, whether in our relationships, in our job, and what's happening politically. And I think, and I used to blog at this website, what is it called? WordPress, pittsburghimmigrant.wordpress.com. And I had written about the secret to happiness, in my view, is basically a lack of any expectation. And I think the only way you can avoid disappointment is to really not expect anything from anyone. And but it's easier said than done. What I'm saying is that we all, I think, have certain expectations of other people and things, and it's very hard. So I'd like you to speak a little bit more, if you can, about how you actually go about avoiding disappointment in people when they don't measure up. You've spent all this time and effort on somebody and they don't reciprocate, or things are happening politically and you feel that you cannot do anything. I mean, there's so many ways where you experience disappointment. So you're saying the absence of disappointment is the secret of happiness. And I'd just like to know if you have, maybe you've had something in the past about on this particular topic, but I do believe that the lack of expectation, if you don't have any expectations of anything, then you can avoid disappointment. But how do you really, not have any expectations in anything? I mean,
Yeah, and I actually, I'm gonna politely say I don't think not having expectations is the right path, because that also says like I don't need to expect myself to make a living anymore, right? I don't need to expect myself like we all have expectations. You can't avoid expectations, and I don't think we need to. What you need to do, and this is why I came up with the saying, keep your hopes high and your disappointment low. It's the only way to go. Have expectations, but if you don't meet those expectations, don't let it disappoint you. Just either push back the date upon which you're going to achieve that thing or change the goal that you have. Maybe the goal is just too unrealistic and now you're going to go after something different. That's fine too. And there's a great book. It's like it's like a 15-minute read. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? And my late stepmother gave me that a long time ago. And it's so simple and silly, but also profound. Go ahead. You wanted to comment, and then I'll keep. You're on mute, Kamala. Come on.
I was talking more about disappointment, not in myself or what I've achieved, but in other people, in relationships, in people not, if you do a lot and you're just, and other people just don't measure up, and how not to be disappointed in that.
Yeah, so we have thank you for clarifying. So we have a cultural value in my startup, and it is help others. If they appreciate it and or help you back, keep helping them. If not, you did a good deed, right? And like, don't go in expecting them to help you back or be not, be appreciative. And if they're not, be disappointed. That doesn't help. But we all have limited time on this earth. So let's just keep helping the people who are at least appreciative and help even more the ones that help us back to increase our sphere of influence. And when they increase our sphere of influence, just like we increase theirs, then we now have more influence to help them back again. And it creates this mutually synergistic effect. I think we had another event on altruism, and I would argue that this is what healthy altruism looks like. You know, some people try to claim that an altruist should get nothing back, not even satisfaction from helping others. That's a nonsense definition of altruism that's impossible to meet, and no one should even be thinking about for more than like 3 seconds to say that it's a terrible definition and no one should use it. There's a much better definition, which if you want to go to our event on altruism, it'll be up on YouTube if it's not there yet. Does that make more sense, Kamana?
Yeah. It's just, as I said, these principles are great. It's just basically implementing and putting
Totally.
it is the difficulty.
That is exactly what membership is about, is implementing them and, working in a group of peers that wants to follow the five intentions and talk about, hey, I was in this situation, guys, and, I wasn't sure what I should do. What do you guys think? And you'd be amazed at the amount of wisdom that we've all learned, myself included, like we all learn from these sessions. The current pod, well, we have two pods, but one meets on Sundays. That's the most active one. And then the other one meets in person in New York City occasionally. And so, yeah, I would encourage you, if you are looking for a peer group of people to do that with. And I think you said, are you in New York as well?
I'm actually in the Washington, D.C. area.
Washington, D.C. Okay. So, but the one that meets on Sundays is through Zoom, so it's remote, so you'd be able to join that one. And then to mention about being politically unable to like move the needle or make a difference, that's where I would follow the Stoic path, which is separate what's in your control from what's out of your control.
Right.
You may not be able to decide who the next president are, but you can decide, which, campaign to volunteer for. And, you can influence maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe 200 people to make a better decision than they would have otherwise through your influence. And so do what you can, and feel like you have a voice and that you're doing what you can with the time and effort you have to give.
So I do have one or two other comments, but I will save those until everybody else.
Yeah, can you go raise your hand again, because we have a bunch of hands up.
Because
and I thought I saw someone put the party hat on. We don't do the party hat anymore. We just have people speak up. So if anyone else wanted to comment on what Kamana said, feel free.
Hi, it's Robin. I was actually feeling what Kamana was mentioning, and I was thinking about it from relationships where you have more investment, your children, your parents, and where it's more difficult. You may not really see yourself in these relationships yet your child. I'm thinking about my 25-year-old daughter and some of the discussions that we get into, and we just can't get beyond it, so just what she mentioned made me think about, more personal relationships where you have to navigate through trying to find a more common ground, or as you mentioned, what's the term? Wrote it down. Well, at any rate, yeah, I think I need to hear more about this myself.
Cool. Thanks. And Brenda, to raise your hand at the bottom, there's a reactions, or in the three dots that say more, there's a reactions thing, and under reactions, there's a raise hand option. Katie, I tried to ask you to unmute. You may want to try to quit and come back, if it's not letting you unmute. But we'll let NK go, and Katie, probably if you quit and come back, it'll work. NK.
Thanks, Gareth. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I love what you said about a couple of things to measure your self-worth by. And there are a few things you mentioned that you should not measure your self-worth by. Things that you shouldn't measure your self-worth by. You mentioned like your job and how much money you make and things like that. which I totally agree with. The way I kind of see this is, I think the source of our unhappiness is how we measure our self-worth. And there's like really endless number of things that we can measure our self-worth with. And it could be the things you mentioned, a job, money, and all that. But there are like endless other things like our intelligence, our education, how much people like us, uh, you know, uh, level of skills we have in dealing with people. Basically, there are endless number of things, and I see them as our ego traits. So these are, we have a lot of things that, we base our ego on these things, and when our ego gets hurt, then then we feel bad and we feel worthless. And so the way I see this is, we should measure our self-worth. We should be aware of this, first of all, that there are endless number of things that we measure our worth by. And so we can't keep track of them at all times. There's just, it's not possible. And it's a source of constant unhappiness. And a lot of times we're not even aware of it. And what was I going to say? Yeah, so we should focus on a couple of core things instead of just specific things. What I consciously think of is, our I believe in, I'm not religious, but I believe we all have a soul, and it's an eternal soul. So we should appreciate the fact that, we are eternal souls, and that makes us worthy regardless of any of our traits. And then if we just keep that in mind, and on top of that, try to be ethical, not hurt others, be kind. And those three things, just remember that, forget about all that other things, because people are constantly probing you. They're constantly challenging you. As soon as you step outside your door, they judge you by your looks, how intelligent you are, what kind of car you drive. It's just like endless number of things. And then just decide that I'm not gonna trade with you guys on any of those things. Those yeah, trading traits. So I'm not gonna trade with anybody on any of those things. I'm just gonna keep in mind the basic things. I'm an eternal soul. I'm a good person. I have good intentions toward others, and just forget all the other qualities that people measure my worth by. And the only other thing that I focused on is just, besides being ethical, is just have curiosity about life. Try things. If you want to become an engineer or learn something, it's like, yeah, it's nice. I want to learn something. I want to achieve something. There's nothing wrong with doing those things, but don't measure your worth based on those things. Those are just other qualities. And then one last thing, we all get old. A lot of us lose those traits. We lose our looks. Our money could be gone in 1 second. But just keep in mind that you're eternal soul, and as long as you're not hurting others, you're good to go. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're saying a lot of the same stuff, MK. I also believe we have an eternal soul, and I have a logical defense for it, which actually starts with last week's event on defending free will. And if my argument defending free will is correct, then I can logically prove we have an eternal soul. And then when you say don't hurt others and be kind, that's where I say maximize happiness and minimize harm. And when you say be curious about life, that's what I call open-mindedness. So I think we're saying a lot of the same stuff, and it sounds like you're a very, and I do think ethics is important. And I think, the five intentions are intended to be, rules that if you follow them, you will be ethical. And in fact, I'm working with an organization that a collaborator named Richard Messing, who's the executive director of the World Ethics Organization. I'm working with them to create an ethical credo on ethics, which will incorporate a lot of the five intentions, I hope. into it. So yeah. Jess.
Hi. Great presentation. I actually have two questions, but I don't want to hog the time. So do you want me to ask one or can I ask both?
There's only one other hand up, so if you don't mind, just ask one because that's our rule, and then raise your hand right again, and then right after Stephen, you'll go for your second one.
Okay, cool. So I actually wanted to go back to false humility because I unintentionally struggle with this, but it's not, I don't do it in a malevolent way. It's just um, feedback I've gotten makes me like hyper aware of how I phrase things. And so I try to like really sugarcoat it. So just for some like background, I'm a dominant INTJ but I bounce between INTJ and INFJ. So I really like logic and I love a good brainstorm. I love being wrong. I love being proven wrong. And so I'm an accountant, and so and the job I do, I'm always looking for the right answer. And I don't necessarily have to be right, but I think the way it comes across is, I've gotten, you're really intimidating when you speak because I think I'm really into logic. And I maybe care a little bit more than other people. Maybe it comes across as intense. So over the years, I've had to really try to water down, not water down, but like really sugarcoat a challenging question so that other people don't feel like I'm trying to call them out or make them seem wrong. But really, all I'm trying to do is have a discussion about the item in a productive way. But now it just feels like I'm not being authentic because I'm taking more time to try to get a point across because I'm really concerned about feelings because I'm not trying to be this really straightforward INTJ and I'm trying to also care. So yeah, I guess that's my question is how does someone like me who's not inherently malevolent, who's really just trying to have like when I get around people who don't really care about feelings and who really care about the work, oh my God, like it's magical. Um, but most of the world really needs the nurturing. So like so what is your advice for that?
Yeah, I can actually I hope that I can give pretty good advice because what you said really resonates with me personally. That's how I've been my whole life, and I'm still working on this, but I think I'm much further along than I was when I was an INTJ, which I was early on in my 20s. I was an INTJ, like extreme I. Now I'm, an ENTJ, but sometimes test out as an F like you. But basically the thing that I've learned is that rather than uh, Victoria, we're going to talk about the Myers-Briggs, which is what we're talking about next week. So we'll get to that next week. I'll talk about what INTJ means, and I'll try to give a quick overview if we have time later. But basically, what I would encourage you to do is rather than point out where someone else is wrong or ask, or like kind of like just like say like dry like you probably have a tendency, if I'm not wrong and you can tell me if I am wrong, to sort of like hone in on exactly where the flaw is and point it out even if someone else might be the root cause of that flaw. And another way to do that in a way that's a lot more subtle and does take longer. And I know that, we all want to get things done quickly, but you'll find that your message will be much better received if you take a little more time to just ask Socratic questions and where, where you basically, I'm not going to say play dumb. Don't play dumb, but like ask thoughtful questions that kind of lead the people in the room to get to where you are because you might be ahead of where they are, and ask thoughtful questions that leave a trail of breadcrumbs that they can follow and that will help you all discover together so they feel like they're a part of the discovery rather than you leading, ahead of the pack and they're trying to keep up with you. Does that make sense and resonate?
Yeah, it does. I think I also have read about that approach, but I was like, am I going to seem manipulative? Like, I don't know if I'll be good at sounding natural.
It takes practice,
Yeah.
and it's not manipulative because you're not trying to trap them. You're just trying to bring them along with you. I think it's a more compassionate approach, to be honest. And you sound like a very caring person if you test out as an F and you're extremely logical, which is where I am. Like, I test out as a T most of the time, but I occasionally test out as an F just because I really care about people. But like, I'm hyper logical, like hyper rationalism is my saboteur. Like when I took the saboteurs test, I was like very far into the hyper rationalist. So, it's if you're asking the questions in a way that helps everybody discover what you think is right, but you also are open that, hey, you may learn something in answering those questions that helps you discover that your original hypothesis was wrong. And when it does, you won't even look wrong. You'll just, realize you were wrong along the way because the answer wasn't what you thought it was.
Right.
And in some respects, like, it's actually it's a slower process, but it's also a much more consensus driven process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Thank
Cool.
you.
Cool. Stephen, go ahead.
I'll probably say a transition in my life is, probably basically the dialectic. We all love our opinions, and I was creating opinions all the time and trying to prove my opinions were the best. And I realised, of course, that's just a thesis, and you have to hold up your other hand and say, well, I could be wrong. And I suddenly realised I was living in a world of people who almost all over the place are following their opinion and thesis without considering that they could be wrong. And that's very, very widespread today. But on the other aspect, I would question the role of happiness. There's the Greek idea of eudaimonia. But another aspect, when we're creating these rationalisms and rational intentions, a good question is the context, and the context is the nature of our world. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think context is important, but yeah, I do think context is important. Can you summarize? I'm sorry, can you summarize again, like what your main point was? Because I was not totally following.
I just introduced the idea of the dialectic in my own simple terms, but when you have a series of rationalisms, which like your intention points are, the question is observation as well. What's the nature of the world we're in? So, for example, if you're following, let's say, a rational process, you might have, these are good ideas. Then you have to ask yourself, well, why are these good ideas? Or if you say we should be ethical, well, then you've got to ask, well, why should I be ethical? I might have various motives for being ethical, self-interest, that makes me feel good, but it's not an absolute, is it? So what is the nature of the world? For example, I used to be a Marxist, and one of the things about Marx was the Marxists believed that every aspect of life should become political. And I think I woke up one day, well, politics only concerns how we interact with others. There's the private space of our mind is our own. It doesn't belong to society. And there are other aspects of the nature of the world as well. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Out of curiosity, why do you think the five intentions are rationalist?
Well, a rationalism is for example, we have the laws of physics. We know, if we put our hand in the hot water, it's going to get burned. So that's the objective facts. Then we come to subjectives. Now, properly speaking, a rationalist is a person who believes that in the subjective mind, as in physics, there are things that actually happen. The rationalist will believe that in our subjective mind, there are definite values. So there are rational ideas and there's irrational ideas. For example, what you mentioned in rationalism, the two wolves. The guy said, the wolf that's going to win is the one I feed. So he's saying, go with, say, the positive intentions rather than do all the negative things in your mind, and you'll end up in a better condition. So that's a rational belief that definitely, if I follow a series of positive intentions rather than giving into the negative intentions, then my life will improve. There you are, rationalism. Thank you.
Sure. I guess, I see rationalism often contrasted with empiricism, and putting your hand in the hot water is experimental. So I see that as empiricist. And then rationalism is like, supposed to be a priori logic, as I understood it. And the first intention is to use both reason and intuition. Intuition isn't rationally justified. It's assumed to be true because it's so obvious that you just assume it to be true. So I think I have kind of a mix of rationalism and empiricism and a variety of other philosophical sort of perspectives in the five intentions, although maybe I'm wrong. So that it wasn't intended to be just rationalist. And so maybe
I might correct something.
Yeah.
There, and the question of empiricism, rationalism, or the laws of physics, are a series of rules. Like, we're not just experimenting by putting our hand in the water. We've already learned that there's a rule there: don't put your hand in boiling water. So that's the rationalism, you see, rather than the experiment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the combination of rationalism and empiricism, where you know that putting the hand in the water caused pain the last time. That was the empiricism. And then you know that, if you were to do it again, it's going to hurt your hand again. So let's just not do that again. Can we can we be rational here? And so, for me, like, I don't feel like, I think that rationalism versus empiricism is a false dichotomy. And I don't feel like I have to choose one or the other. And that's why, like, for me, the five intentions are intended to be both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, be careful with that one, because that was a fight in philosophy.
Oh, I know. I have no problem jumping in
Rationalism
between philosophical fighters and coming up with a different opinion than the norm. I have no problem being the redheaded stepchild of redheaded stepchildren. I very often am. So
yeah, that's sort of a simple way of viewing it. When I started to follow the stuff a bit more, you start to realize there's more to it than that.
Okay, well, maybe
I would say empiricism and rationalism are not opposites, which they're treated as, but they're not.
I agree with you.
Opposites.
I agree with you. They should not be considered opposites. I agree with you completely. But maybe if you're interested in doing a presentation on empiricism and realism, it might be interesting. I don't know if you have an appetite for doing that, but it might be fun to have you present on it if you're interested.
Hello, 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 hello.
Jenny's
Hello.
saying hi to you, Aaliyah.
Okay, let me use my camera here.
Sorry, Stephen.
Yeah,
Jenny likes
hi.
to see my daughters.
Oh, she's, what's her name again?
Aaliyah.
Elia. Hi, Elia. Hi.
So let's let Jess go next, unless Stephen, you had more that you wanted to mention. All right, so Jess, go ahead.
I'm back. Okay, so my last question was going to be on confirmation bias. Because I mean, I haven't fully read The Room, but you know, it seems like we're all open here. So I don't know how you all feel about Jordan Peterson, but I'm reading his new book. Yeah, I have to like really preface it. But I'm reading 12 Rules for Life. I think he has an interesting mind. Um, but he has a passage in his book about sustained inattentional blindness, where there was a psychologist who did a study where he sat people down in front of a screen. So let's say it's displaying like wheat, and uh, he would slowly change the image to have like a road cutting through the wheat, and people would barely notice. People would not notice that the image changed because they are seeing what they want to see, which is the wheat. Um, and then he also goes on to say like the world, you basically only see and attract what you want to see in the world. And so my question was, how on earth do you counter or balance confirmation bias if, you know, I'm looking for something subconsciously and that's all I'm going to see, and that's probably more than likely the people that I'm going to attract are the people who are going to resonate or, you know, tell me what I want to hear. Otherwise I don't want to associate with them, right? Like naturally.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's not a fatal foregone conclusion that we will all have confirmation bias in everything. Imagine what, you know, if you had confirmation bias in everything you believed, you would never have changed a bad belief. And I would bet, Jess, that you could think of one thing that you got wrong at some point in your life. I bet you could think of a lot of them. And if you had 100% confirmation bias about everything, you would have never come to the conclusion that any of your beliefs were wrong at all. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So that's the extreme, but then it gets actually much better than that. If we are consciously, actively seeking opposition to our current beliefs. And what I do in my startup is I actively seek for people who disagree with me first, because psychological studies show that if two or three people agree with someone, no one feels comfortable, or very few people feel comfortable speaking out against that opinion. And so what I do is I say, well, this is what I think. Who disagrees with me? And if you make a conscious effort in meetings to ask people who disagrees with you first consciously, you will uncover the disagreement at a time when people feel comfortable speaking out against you, rather than just, you know, all right, so this is what I think, who agrees with me? And then you only hear the assent, and then that those two people in the, you know, like, you know, two people in the corner of the room who have really good reasons to think you're wrong, they don't feel comfortable speaking up. And, you know, because everyone else agreed with you. And so, you know, there are a lot of things, and I don't want to repeat our whole event on confirmation bias, but I think you would enjoy it. If it's not on YouTube, it will probably either come up on YouTube in the next month or two, or if you want it sooner, just send me a message on Discord or on Meetup, and I'll get you the recording if we have one. If we don't have one, we'll repeat the event.
Okay. Yeah, that was an interesting point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we can and we need to combat confirmation bias. Like our ability to distinguish fact from fiction and wisdom from folly depends on, you know, not getting stuck in our bad ideas. So we have to make a vigilant effort at combating confirmation bias, and we should all be doing it, like every single one of us. And I work very hard to combat my own confirmation bias, and I'm still probably not doing enough. That said, NK, go ahead.
Thank you. So Garrett, I'm curious about how you came about the 5 rules to live by to find happiness. Um, I mean, finding happiness is something that humanity has strived for forever, and there are all kinds of philosophies. You mentioned some of them, Stoicism. There are different religions. There are everybody has some things, you know, that they do to bring about happiness. I mean, I can think of like a dozen different things to add to that list. How do you is there a way to just like draw a circle around a list of things and then they say, okay, if I do this, it's going to make me happy. But there are endless other things also. And it's also about, figuring out what this life is about. And, you know, and if that, would that bring us, it's so many, it's so multifaceted and so complex that how do you just find a list? I, and then, okay, and then say, okay, this is this, follow this and you'll find happiness. And you mentioned also one of your comments that you believe in continuous growth because um, uh, if you stop, then you lose that opportunity, and it is basically something good. But I'm just curious about how do you find something that in this life, and basically you present like a present with a bow, and then say, okay, this is a final answer, and then this is a bullet list, and then there's all the answers, and there's a happiness. How do you come to that? And I'm not criticizing you, by the way. I think the list is great, and I really got a lot out of it. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious about your thought process about how do you go about figuring out life and then just bringing it down to a list. I have my own personal list, by the way, and it's continuously evolving. But I'm
Yep.
just curious about your thought process on how you came about your list.
Thanks for asking. I started at the beginning. You may not have been here when I mentioned it, so I'll try to repeat a little bit, but I'll add a little bit more to the story. One of the probably first 10 essays that I wrote was my life philosophy. And that was like a force rank prioritized list of about 40 different rules that were like in prioritized order because I'm a very analytical guy, so I force rank prioritize everything. I spent a lot of time in Fortune 500 companies and we're all about force rank prioritization, so I did that. And I spent a lot of time like refining it, and I circulated, I shared it, and I refined it, and then I tried to simplify it all to one rule, and that was too simple, and I couldn't cover the nuance that I thought was necessary to to cover the wide range of things that needed to be covered. And so I ultimately, met for hundreds of hours with philosophical friends, had conversations about how to simplify to a small set of rules that really cover it's an 80-20 type of thing. I wanted to cover 80% of the territory and 20% of the distance, the time, have a small number of rules that covered a wide number of life situations. And uh, I tried to like make it so that it covered whatever scenario you come into, that following those 5 rules will end you up in a better place than you would have if you hadn't followed those rules. And and I have been, reading about and learning about philosophy, pretty much since college. I've been philosophically curious since I was 12 and thinking about the meaning of life since I was 12. And so the short answer is a lot of thinking and a lot of noodling and a lot of feedback and a lot of transparently sharing my beliefs with other people and then letting them criticize them and then patching up the holes where I had flaws and making them better over time. And that's why I said, I don't think this set of rules is done. Like, I don't think it's final. I don't think it's exactly right. I think it's good. I think it's useful. I hope it is. And you guys can tell me based on your critical thinking skills, whether you agree or not, and why not. I'm very open to that feedback. And I don't mind if you criticize me, by the way. Like, I like criticism because that's what helps me be the best version of myself, seek truth, and be fair. And that's what will help me evolve the 5 intentions into something better in the next 5 or 10 years for the remainder of my life, I hope. I'll continuously be improving them wherever needed. But I think that they move forward from the the existentialists. They move forward from utilitarianism. They address the flaws in existentialism and utilitarianism, and they move the dialogue about what's right and wrong forward and what's a way to live life more happily forward. They recognize the fact that most harm is caused by people with misunderstandings, and they get at trying to see the truth more clearly in a logical way. And so the long story short is a lot of thinking and a lot of being open to other, following them myself, quite frankly. And I've had people read them and go, Garrett, this isn't anything interesting. I already do this. And I'm like, great. If you already do this, then you're in good shape. And, they just didn't write it down. That was just the way they naturally do things. And I think that's someone following their intuition, because I think all the five intentions are very intuitive if you follow your heart and your mind at the same time. Does that answer your question?
It does. It's awesome. And I'm curious, do you have a process that you follow to refine that? Like, is there a method that you use to tweak that, or is it just like as you learn, you just add to it?
So, it's really just being open-minded and listening. And when people say, I still have a list of things on my, one of the things I teach is a goal setting methodology. And so I have daily, weekly, monthly, annual goals. And some of my goals, I think it's weekly or monthly goals. I have a bunch of philosophical things that friends have pointed me to that I need to read that will probably help me further refine the five intentions in different ways, or at least help me realize why they have certain advantages and base them in like historical philosophical contexts. And so there's a lot of like learning about what past philosophers said, but also what average people say, because I often learn just as much from people in these events or people at our meetups in New York City, or people that I've met online and chat philosophy with, as I do from, what I like to joke are the old dead white guys, which are the historical philosophers, although not all of them are white and guys. There are plenty of female philosophers and philosophers of color too. So I think it's just a matter of listening, being open to the feedback, and really following the five intentions to refine them.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Dave, how are you? Good to see you again.
Great, Garrett, and I really enjoyed the presentation. I think those are good rules to live by. A couple thoughts on confirmation bias.
Yes, please.
Good demonstration online is called The Invisible Gorilla.
Yes, it is a great one.
And I assume it's still online. It's just amazing because we take our vision as concrete. I saw it. It was right there. And the invisible gorilla teaches it ain't necessarily so. And also,
Dave, can you tell everybody what that's about?
well, it's about confirmation biases. You see,
tell them the
well, they
way
show
that it
you
works.
something and you watch it and they show it to you again and say, "Oh, no, I'm not going to don't give it away. Let them," because
Okay. I was going to
thought,
explain the whole
well,
thing,
it
but
was just two different videos. And then I saw it again with somebody else. And no, it's the same video twice. But the other thing is, one of my favorite words is counterintuitive. And along with that is good lawyers and judges and police, whatever, never trust eyewitnesses because they can easily contradict themselves. It's saying, just go back this way. I saw it and it's true. And like the Zimmerman and the black kid crime, that one guy saw the kid on top, and the other guy, said Zimmerman was on top. And oh yeah, they both swear it was. But anyway, thanks again. And I enjoyed it. Sometimes, well, anyway, yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend it. I don't know if there's a good way. I got given the invisible gorilla experience in high school. I think it was my one of my favorite teachers that did that, my chem teacher. And it's very insightful. So for anyone who hasn't done it, you get a friend to give you the invisible gorilla experience, and it's worth doing, and it's a good thing to learn from. So Steven, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I sort of in recent years come across the term critical thinking. Only been doing philosophy a bit solidly for about 5 years now. But I tend to notice that there's a lot of people running around using the term critical thinking to mean a particular set of rigidly defined values which you agree to. And if you don't agree with them, there's something wrong with you. You have noticed that, I assume. Yeah, over.
Okay, so you're saying that a lot of people use the term critical thinking in saying that if you don't agree to our set of rigid values, then you're not a critical thinker. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's been used as a catchword, I think, in recent times.
Interesting. I would love to see a context where you feel like it's being used that way. That's not how I mean it. You could check out our series on critical thinking. I kind of mean it in the opposite, in that it's intended to be an improvement on, and I sort of summarize it in the ability to discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly, meaning like if you know how do I say this? So, I like to joke that consensus doesn't change reality. And, if you are in a room, and I gave the example of like, so there's a great psychology experiment where they have this is where I learned about it in as when I audited a day of Cornell's Psych 101 class. And they had a test where there were 7 people and there were 7 lines on a piece of paper. And they asked the first person, are all these lines in a row? And they were like, yeah. And they asked all 7 people, and every one of them said, yes, they're all in a row. Well, it turns out those 7 lines were not all in a row. The seventh one was very clearly not in a row at all. But because the first 6 people, who were, by the way, part of the experiment and all lied and said they were all in a row, but the seventh person never felt comfortable challenging. And so if they were using their critical thinking skills, they would have been willing to challenge the status quo. They would have trusted their own judgment rather than just followed the consensus of what was said before them. And so for me, what critical thinking is about is teaching people to think more independently and to, improve their judgment so that they can rely on their own judgment rather than following other people. Now, there are also times where we do need to rely on other people in modern life. You don't want to like have a medical illness and decide you're going to self-diagnose and, try to pretend to be a doctor and give yourself medications and, for a bacterial infection when you never got swabbed. And, there's like all kinds of, what is it, like the guy that pretended to be a doctor, the Catch Me If You Can movie was about. That was based on a true story, by the way. And so the idea of critical thinking for me is about helping people better discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly. And all of the many things that go into that are what it's really about. Because I do think that there's objective reality out there, and trying to better understand it is good. There's also subjective truths, like I said in the presentation, and learning about both of those is important. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's very nice, thank you.
So there probably are people misusing the term critical thinking, but I would argue that it's one of the biggest things missing in modern life is having more people have critical thinking skills. Most people are
yeah. Well,
followers.
I think I had that a little bit of an argument. A person was watching this YouTube video, and a person commits a misdemeanor and gets taken away by the police, and that's all the YouTube video shows you. And she said, "Oh, they went to jail." I said, "Why? Why do you think they went to jail?" And she said, one of the comments down below said, "Oh, they went to jail. And I said, well, that commenter doesn't necessarily know what happened. And she goes, but the police took them away.
Right.
And I said, yeah, they committed a misdemeanor. So the cops take them to the shop, charge them. Later on, they'll appear at a magistrate or something like that, and they'll probably be fined. And I had to explain that all to them. So it's, they're a young person, so you're trying to explain how reality works, but that's all based on experience. I couldn't intuit all that.
I would tell you that it's not about being young, it's about having critical thinking skills. And there are probably, I've met people who were 14 that had great critical thinking skills that could out critically think people that I know, like the average people that I know that are 40. And so some people, and I like to joke that age is an opportunity to become wise. Some of us take advantage of it and others don't. And wisdom is largely the result of using critical thinking skills effectively. And I would argue that the fourth intention is about, wisdom is about increasing happiness and decreasing harm after preventing significant unnecessary harm. But that said,
of course, we live in a world with the hidden persuader big time now.
What's that?
The Hidden Persuader. Vance Packard wrote a book called The Hidden Persuaders back in 1950s. And
I'm not familiar with the book.
Vance Packard, you might have heard his name, famous author from the 1950s. And that was a revelation that we're now living in a world where advertisers are all over the place trying to sway our opinion.
Yes.
We didn't have to put up with that so much when we're back in the cave, but we're in the modern world where we're being bombarded by persuasion from advertisers, for example.
Yeah, I think that I'm seeing what it's written about now from a ChatGPT summary. I think that's one aspect is advertising, but the other aspect is the political aspect where I was mentioning that fake news travels faster than real news. People will see something, and they'll go, "Oh my God, that's outrageous!" Share, right? Before checking whether or not it's real, And the fact is, like, and there's a great blog post called Red Church Blue Religion or something like that. If you Google Red Church Blue Religion, Red Religion Blue Church or something like that, it basically talks about how historically, up until the advent of social media, pretty much all news came from highly vetted sources that had a strong reputation for being honest, or they would lose their businesses. And only with the modern advent of social media can anyone share anything and get a large number of followers, even if everything they say is totally not true. And this has really upended society. And I don't think that society had the critical thinking skills. I think it's very clear that society does not currently have the critical thinking skills to be resilient to the amount of fake news that's going on. And interestingly, in the US, half of the country says the other half's watching fake news, and that half says the first half's watching fake news. And I'm not going to say which half I think is fake news. All I'm going to do is try to teach everybody to have the critical thinking skills to be able to discern for themselves which half they think fake news is, because they can better discern fact from fiction and wisdom from folly. Because I think that's really what we need to solve this problem. Because saying which half is fake news just plays into the political narrative that the other half is, claiming that the first half is fake news, and that's not useful to anyone, right? And it just makes people angry, and like that's not a game I'm interested in playing.
I suppose there's an element like, the recent debate between Israel and Palestine. Everyone's got an opinion on it. And of course, if you've got the wrong opinion with certain friends, then you're in hot water. And what I suddenly realised is it's like the Great Game when the superpowers, Russia and America, used to go to Vietnam and fight their war by proxy. And I suddenly realised this is what people are doing today. They look at these issues like Israel versus Palestine, and they proxy support a certain side as if it has huge bearing on their own life. That if their preferred side wins, they're going to be happy and their life will improve. But they're really, or for example, I would say people who support Palestine tend to support the underdog, and they feel that they themselves are underdogs, and therefore the underdog team becomes their team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
so be wary of this. Looking at external powers always as your preferred proxy.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot of that going on, and the wars are getting less physically violent, and now modern warfare is won with hearts and minds rather than with weapons and killing, although there still are weapons and killing, but I think that that's at least an evolution. But the way to help make sure that the right thing is what wins in the modern world of most wars being fought with hearts and minds is to teach what is a good way of making better decisions. And that's what the five intentions are intended to do, is to teach a better decision-making process. That's really what the five intentions are. They're a force-rank prioritized decision-making process that will help you make better decisions for yourself and the people you can influence. And if we can help people use that as a starting point, and then there's a lot more that goes into it. And that's where someone said, there's dozens of things I could add here. Yes, there are. There's lots of nuance, but I would argue that it all falls under one of the five intentions. And then, like the critical thinking skills, I had a 2-month series on critical thinking skills because there's so much to learn in critical thinking. And I think less than 30% of Americans have been shown to have critical thinking skills. So that's not a good place to be. I don't think it's actually that much higher than that internationally, to be honest. So let's not just make fun of the Americans, although we like to do that a lot. But and for good reason, Americans do say some silly stuff, and don't ask us to put anything on a map because some of us have reasonably good geography, but most of us don't. So, does anyone else have questions?
How much of the population can be good critical thinkers?
I think 100% could theoretically be good critical thinkers. I think we should strive for 100%, but if we could at least get 60 to 70%, I would be happy with that, because at least the majority, enough of the majority, would have critical thinking skills that we would have better outcomes in terms of electing politicians. Right now, the approval ratings of Congress are lower than the approval ratings of polygamy. I mean, that's scary, right? The approval ratings of Congress, I believe, are single digits. So it's really low. And I'm like, I guess I don't mean to knock polygamy either if anyone's into that, but Congress has a lot of improvement to make. That said, Kay, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. I'm wondering if Richard would be willing to speak briefly to expand on his points in the chat about the conditioned mind doing critical thinking. Richard?
I'm happy to give him a minute or two if he wants to speak up.
Richard, would you like to come and speak about critical thinking by way of the conditioned mind?
Yeah, critical thinking is just, see, the brain is conditioned, and then the conditioned mind, the conditioning, says, okay, this is what critical thinking is. So it makes up stuff. And it's a slave. The brain is a slave to the mind. So the brain is not paying attention. It's not connecting. It's not in communication with what is happening, the actuality of what is happening. Instead, it believes what the mind is telling it. So the senses are limited. The interpretation of the senses by the mind is limited, finite. And so it can never come to the truth. It can never see the whole because it's always, it's a slave to the movement of the finite. So can the brain at a visceral level, visceral, not intellectual merely, but at a visceral level, become aware of its occupation? That is, it is occupied by the mind, by the me, the self. And in so becoming aware of it, be free of it, which then will give birth to true love, to truth. Love is all there is. Love is everything. It's the very fabric of the universe. It's just a word that thought invented for it. So don't get caught up in the word, truth, love, beauty. It's all the same. They're just different words for the exact same thing. And you're already there. But again, you're trapped, you're dreaming, and you're trapped in the dream. You're not living the truth. The mind may imagine this is the truth, but whatever it thinks the truth is not the truth. Because thought is limited, based on limited knowledge, limited experience. It's always limited. It's always the past. It's not what's happening now. So can we become aware of that? Being aware of that fact brings you to silence. And it's only then that you can see the truth. But you're busy with the mind. The mind is trying to figure it out. The mind is the movement of noise, chaos. La, 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 la. It's doing this. It has made everything complicated. Oh my God. It's driving the brain body, crazy, neurotic. The brain body has become neurotic, okay? Filled with fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, a bundle of mental, emotional disturbances.
Thanks, Richard.
So,
Sean has his
Yeah, I
hand
have
up. Go
two
ahead,
questions
Sean.
for Richard. First, what's the difference between your brain and the mind? Your mind and your thought, or whatever. Okay.
The
Second
mind
is
is
how you uncondition your mind or brain, whatever. How can you do that?
First of all, be aware of what's happening first before you ask, how do we get rid of it? Or how do we uncondition the mind or uncondition the brain? First, be aware of the conditioning. Be aware that you are conditioned and you're always thinking all your thoughts, everything out of your mouth, all your actions are reactions based on this movement of this active memory. So the mind, I'm using the word mind, the I, the me, the self, the psyche, the consciousness, just different words, again, referring to the same thing, which is this bundle of active memory. It's acting as the observer, the perceiver, the listener, the chooser. It's inventing stuff. It's making stuff up, and you believe it, your brain body. So you're never in contact with what is actually taking place. You think you are, right? So did that answer your question? The mind is the bundle of active memory, as opposed to the passive memory. Passive memory, I'm using passive memory now, using the English language, using my computer. That requires passive memory, knowledge, skill, know-how, right? That is necessary for function. We're not talking about that. We're talking about active memory, the memory that goes into building up this identity structure called me, my life, my house, my car, my family, me, right? So is that clear, or should we go deeper into it?
Actually,
I think that's all we have time
thank you
for
very much,
tonight,
sir.
but I do appreciate everyone's coming tonight, and thanks everyone for your time and attention, for the great questions and conversation. Hope to see you guys next week when we talk about the MBTI, Myers-Briggs personality type, and how you can use it to better understand other people, where they're coming from, and how to get along better with them. So I learned about the MBTI in GE's IT leadership program. It was like a CIO training program, and so would love to teach you guys what I learned there. Certainly not everything about the MBTI, but it's some useful stuff, and I'll try to offer some value. So hope everybody has a great week, and join us in the online community. The link to the online community is on our website at freethinkerinstitute.org. So that's using software called Discord, and would love to continue the conversation there with you all. So hope everyone has a great night and take care.
Thank you, Garrett.
Bye.
Thank you. Great.